Hey, hello again. Well, I'm out on the Emmons Vista Trail near sunrise on Mount Rainier. Beautiful early fall day. Nice and sunny, just a few clouds. Come up here to Mount Rainier. I have a composition in mind. I'm thinking of a portrait just this side of the mountain with some dark, tall pines and a sunlit slope in front of that glacier and rock wall. So I don't want to get the whole mountain. I've done that before. That's a fun challenge. I want to do something kind of reminiscent of a Compton painting. I've seen a few of his where he has just a part of the mountain slope or a very distant mountain, very high value, very grayed out, with some dark, very figurative trees in front of the mountain. So that's what I'm after today. I love the lighting right now. I love how it's hitting some of those rock slopes and casting some beautiful blue shadow on the snow and on the rock. So I want to get set up and do a little 9x12 pretty quickly. Try to catch that shadow pattern. As the sun travels that direction to the west, it's going to change quite a bit, and I think throw most of that face of the mountain, that north face of the mountain, into shadow. So I want to try to capture a beautiful shadow pattern before it's gone. Then I'll have more time to work on the foreground. That the sun on the foreground is not going to change very quickly. So I'll get set up. As always, thanks so much for joining me. If you like these videos, please like and subscribe. Share it with a friend, leave a comment below, that really helps the channel. If you want to use any images from my videos, please do. Feel free to create your own art. If you post anything from the images, all I ask is that you tag me on it so I can see it. Quick rundown on my palette. Well, first, you can see I am set up on a slope. There's kind of a wide spot in the trail here. About the only place I could find with room to stand was a pretty steep slope. So that's where these tripods and this type of setup really helps you. You can set up in almost any condition. I've set up in the middle of shallow streams, on some rocky outcroppings, steep slopes like this. But you do have to be careful. I like to back up and take a look at the painting from a distance, and I don't always look behind me. So you do have to be careful about that. Don't trip and fall down the hill that you're standing on. Believe me, I've done it. So I've got ivory black, cold gray. This is just a gray mixed, equal parts black and titanium white. Got a little turpentine. There's a nice breeze here. It is warm in the sun, but it's a cooler day. It's a nice breeze to take the fumes away. So I'll use the turpentine at first for the sketch and for the turpentine wash. Got Neil McGilp in this little cup. I'll use just a little bit with each mix of paint that I do to get a nice room temperature butter consistency. I'll put a little bit of Gamsol. I'll put the turpentine away as soon as I'm done with the wash, and I'll get the Gamsol out. I'll put a little bit of Gamsol in that small cup to dip my brush in. I'm going to skip the cerulean blue today. I do see some cerulean in the scene, but I thought I would go with cobalt just to change things up a bit. I'm seeing a lot of cobalt in the scene, in the sky, and in the shadows. Ultramarine blue, sap green, burnt umber, burnt sienna, alizarin crimson, cad red, cad yellow, Windsor lemon, and yellow ochre. These are all mostly Rembrandt and Gamblin and Winsor & Newton artist quality colors, which are pretty affordable and pretty high quality. It's not the most expensive paint out there, but it's also not student grade. I like using artist quality paint because it has a heavy pigment load, and I can get to the color I'm looking for quicker and with more punch when I really need it. I find that with like the Winton colors, the student grade, while they're cheaper, you kind of get what you pay for. Sometimes they seem to have a lot of filler. The color washes out, goes to mud pretty quickly. So, you know, that's a tip I would give any painters, don't buy the most expensive paint, but buy an artist quality or reputable paint. An artist that you admire recommends. Got a mix of brushes here. I've got a larger palette knife and a smaller palette knife. I've got a bunch of different sizes of flats and filberts, rosemary evergreens. I've got my big bristle brush to do the initial wash, turpentine wash. I've got my back scratcher maul stick, telescoping maul stick. Then I've got some Rosemary Masters series. These are badger hair, I believe, in different sizes, flats. Those are really nice for adding paint later. When you have a layer down, you can go over the top with that soft hair to get a more rough, random brush stroke and to apply paint in layers. I've got a small bristle here to draw with. I've got a couple eclipses that I play with once in a while. They're a nice rosemary brush, a little harder to control because they're extra long and they're kind of a unique brush. They're like the Masters series. They're a natural hair, but they're really thin. They don't have as many hairs, so while these have kind of a fat end, these are very narrow. I've got another hog bristle here. I've got a small round if I need to do a very fine line. I have a small rosemary ivory here to do drawing with. I've got a Gorilla Painter oil primed linen panel. It's a 9x12. I've got the 1/3 lines sketched in there very lightly with charcoal just to help me set the composition without putting my big shapes too close to the edge. So I'll start with that small ivory and do a quick sketch. I'll use different colors. I like to use alizarin crimson in the background and a little bit of ultramarine blue to keep those colors in the background nice and cool. And then as I come forward, I'll probably switch to burnt sienna and maybe a little bit of cad yellow or burnt umber, warmer colors as I sketch the objects in the foreground. And then I'll use those same colors for the turpentine wash. To give a timestamp, this plein air session was back in late September. I'm just now getting to editing the video. I tend to do a lot of painting, plein air in the summer, and then catch up on editing during the rainy months. It's December 22nd. We're in the holiday season. I'm wishing you and yours happy holidays. When I'm deciding on those colors for the turpentine wash, I'm kind of looking for the colors that are shining through in the scene that I wouldn't mind leaving exposed in the final painting. So for instance, in the foreground, there's lots of yellow ochres kind of shining through, so I may just wash in a big patch of yellow ochre for the foreground and then paint lightly over the top of that with different colors. Alright, I've got a bunch of colors mixed up here. I've got some blues for the sky, a little lighter, more yellow toward the horizon. This is mainly cobalt blue and titanium white. This has a little bit of Windsor lemon added. I've got some colors for the snow on the mountain, just a little higher value than the sky, than the rock on the mountain, in the sun and in the shadow. And as it comes closer into the foothills, it gets a little darker. And I've got some dark green for the foreground pines, in the shadow and in the sun, and I'll creep those into these background rock colors to create those forested foothills. Then I've got some foreground warmer colors. These are mainly cad yellow, yellow ochre, little touch of burnt sienna and white. And this is a little alizarin crimson in the mix to gray it down just a bit. So I'll just shift the colors, try to use just these colors that I've mixed, try to stay away from the vibrant straight out of the tube colors where I can, especially in the background. And I'll add sky color into these mixed colors to gray things out and to lighten things where I think they're looking too dark. I can also use some of these snow colors that I've mixed up. Try to be really sensitive about the snow colors. This is kind of a slightly darker purple pink lavender. This is the same but with more white. This is the same but with more ultramarine blue and white. This is a more yellow, so I've added just a touch more yellow ochre to this mix and more white. And then this is a real gray, warm gray, so more white and more alizarin crimson. You can see I've arranged things from background to foreground, from dark to light. It helps me keep track of my colors. I'll start with this medium-sized flat. It's a number 4 rosemary evergreen long flat. Dip it in just a little bit of Gamsol. I'm going to start with the lightest light, which is almost a pure white, where the sun is catching the snow at the top of the mountain. I kind of like to start by painting the lightest light in my clouds or in my snow-covered mountains. I find it kind of helps me to set the key for the whole painting, and it keeps those lightest lights clean. I find if I try to paint the lightest light later over darker paint, they get muddy, especially painting plein air. I can paint right up into that lightest light and leave the heart of it preserved. As the mountain is rolling over, it gets warm and then it gets cool. So it's kind of a gray white and then a peachy, little bit warmer white, and then it'll be a bluer white as it turns over, as the form turns over into shadow. I'm just kind of following the shape of the mountain now with my brush strokes. Trying to follow the pattern I laid out with that initial wash. See, I'm painting right over the top of those trees that I roughed in earlier, which is just fine. There's enough left there, even through the paint, that I can go back over it then later and recreate them. with this larger evergreen flat and paint in the sky. Start with this lighter sky color down toward the horizon. I see there's some nice wisps of clouds down here. So I think actually what I'll do is go with a clean, smaller brush and use this snow color with just a touch more alizarin crimson and add some of those clouds. I like what those clouds are doing. Alright, there's the mountain, mostly in. Just mapped the sky and the rocks around the lighter values of the snow. Now I'll move into the foreground, the foothills, bring them just a little bit darker and richer as I come forward. As usual, I'm using the largest brush that I think I can manage for the area. I'm trying to stay with this single brush as I paint the different faces of rock. I wipe the brush off on a paper towel when I need to. I find if I use that one brush dipping into the pre-mixed colors, it can create beautiful transitions. I'm trying to stay within the big value shapes that I established during the turpentine wash, but I'm also reacting to the relationships of color and value that I'm seeing in the painting and in the scene. It's hot and dusty, a little too bright, and I'm standing on a slope. So a big part of the challenge is just staying focused and moving forward. Here I'm just knocking some of the ridges off. The light is really raking across the panel right now, so I can see all the ridges. I'm just knocking them down a little bit so they'll be a little less distracting without blending the color a whole lot. Taking away some of those sharp edges and ridges helps to push things back. But I don't want to lose the color pattern, that kind of poster effect I have going. Before I blend any, or before I use it on the sky, I want to make sure it's clean. Okay, that's good. Stepping back a little, you can see that the big shapes are there. Now I'm going to paint in this foreground, and then I'll paint the trees last. Here I'm using a Rosemary Series 279 Badger hairbrush for this foreground. Again, I use a larger brush, as large as I'm comfortable with for the area, and use that one brush with all the different foreground colors. If the color starts to look muddy, I wipe it on a paper towel. If the paint feels too sticky, not flowing off the brush, I dip my brush in a little Gamsol. Using a little smaller evergreen brush, I start to paint the foreground trees. It takes a little practice and a little bravery to paint over the background that you just finished. My mindset is that it's all practice and it isn't guaranteed to work, but I do want to be intentional. This is where following the wash can help. The shapes and spacing looked good in the wash, so it'll likely look good in the finished painting. After stepping back, I can see the paint in the foreground is too thick and catching light. I scrape it down to unify that area so it's not so distracting. Then, using the palette knife, I can add some splashes of clean color to suggest the wildflowers, scrubby dry brush, and fallen dead branches and rock. Here's where it ended up. Pretty strong backlighting, so I hope it's coming through. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with it. I like how simple and pushed back that background mountain is, how the foreground really pops forward. Lighting is pretty harsh right now. It's hard for me to tell exactly how successful it is. I'll take it back to the studio and clean it up a little bit and put it out on my website. It's kind of fun to be inspired by a painting and then go out and try to find something similar to paint, something to play with, develop a different composition. So even if the painting isn't beautiful at the end, I always feel like I learned something. I used quite a bit of palette knife there at the end. I think just because the lighting is so harsh here, I was having a hard time seeing the differences in the values and the colors. When I get it back to the studio, I may scrape a lot of that off. I may find it too harsh, but here with the backlighting, it looks okay. Well, as always, thanks so much for joining me. If you like these videos, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. If you'd like to support the channel, please visit my website. I sell these little plein air pieces at a reasonable price because I consider them practice. It really makes me happy when someone likes my art enough that they want to hang it in their home. You can also sign up for my newsletter and stay up to date on my new work and shows and get a discount on original art and prints.